Good afternoon, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from. We are very much pleased to have this inaugural webinar between PASGR and ESSA. From PASGR, we call it PASGR Plus, People, Learning, Understanding, and Sharing. And we are very, very happy to start the journey with ESSA in starting these conversations that we're going to have, series of conversations that we're going to have going forward on matters higher education, particularly for today on quality assurance for online teaching. So some of you might wonder, what is PASGR Plus? As I said, PASGR Plus is an acronym that stands for People, Learning, Understanding, and Sharing. It is an innovative learning and social platform that it brings together stakeholders in the evidence policy ecosystem across countries in different places that we operate. The idea is sharing and creating a network and community of practice on areas of mutual interest, particularly in policy and governance in the continent. So we are very much together with ESSA this endeavor, where we are engage conversations. Education is a public policy issue. We know what how COVID has devastated higher education, and we feel it's important to share the research and evidence that is coming from what our collaborative work in terms of how that can shape policy and conversations. I'm very much pleased with the panelists who made their time. Thank you so much for making the time to be here with us. Grateful for sharing your expertise, sharing your experiences. I do hope that those who are joining from the different parts of the globe will also be willing to share their inputs and lessons and questions to make this session very interactive and informative. So this, between PASGR and ESSA, this is one of the many series that we are starting. What we have dubbed our series as Beyond the COVID Crisis, using evidence to understand the impact of the pandemic and build a better future of higher education in Sub-Saharan Africa. The again here is to use data and evidence for informed policymaking with a particular focus on higher education, bearing in mind the devastating effects of COVID-19 and the challenges that higher education systems are facing in the continent. This is the right step towards the right direction. We believe that having this conversation, bringing players together in these very timely, engaging conversations is actually the right step to take. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have ESSA as our partner, but we want to appreciate once again our panelists. I know we have Dr. Moku from the AAU, also have, I can't remember your name, you are the commission from the Zimbabwe Commission for Education. I'll have to check the name, but we are very much happy again for you guys to be here and share experiences from Zimbabwe, and Dr. Mokuku from the AAU, given that AAU has an oversight across the continent. We want to also thank the participants who are joining from the different universities in different countries, and again, those are coming from Global North as well. Feel free, and with those remarks from PASGR, we are very happy again to have this conversation, and I hope this is the beginning of more engaging conversation going forward in shaping policy discourse in the continent. So Izzat, allow me to stop there, please. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zayenga. Over to you, Lucy.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So my name is Lucy Heddy, and I'm the CEO of Education Sub Saharan Africa, or ESSA. Now, for those of you who don't know ESSA, we are a small NGO with a majority African team based in Africa and the UK, working to connect data and evidence on education from Africa with those who have the power to improve the system, including educators, policymakers, young people themselves. Our vision is one of high quality education in Sub-Saharan Africa that allows young people to fulfill their ambitions and strengthen society. And our mission starts with universities and colleges, using data and evidence to drive dramatic improvement in outcomes for young people. We work across the student journey, looking at issues of access, quality, and transition to work. And we also support researchers working on education leveraging the power of Africa's universities and colleges to improve outcomes for young people at all levels of education. Now, we're here today to talk about the impact of the pandemic on universities, probably the biggest challenge to improving tertiary education in recent times. Every aspect of university life was affected, from student welfare to research output, to the rapid switching to e-learning, which is central to the topic of today's conversation. Universities and policymakers did a tremendous job of responding to this challenge. However, many were and still are working in the dark due to a lack of data and research to understand the scale of the problem and effective solutions. So it's been an extraordinary privilege for ESSA to work alongside the Inter-University Council for East Africa and its members to collect and analyse empirical data that can inform practical action by university leaders and policymakers. And it has also been a great pleasure to work with the International Association of Universities and increase the power of our respective research results by presenting them together. We're particularly delighted to be sharing this work in partnership with PASGR, an organisation that shares our values and has done so much to ensure that policy is evidence-driven and based on trusted partnerships. Thank you to PASGR for your partnership in co-hosting this event and raising the profile of this critical topic, bringing together the research with our fantastic panelists from the Association of African Universities and the Honourable Minister from Zimbabwe. I think this is where the magic happens, when you bring that research and data together with people who have the real frontline experience of dealing with those challenges. And thank you to everyone joining here today. I really hope that you enjoyed the presentations and that the evidence and experience presented here inspires further action and collaboration. Thank you, and back over to you, Isel.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Anthony and Lucy. Really delighted to have everyone here to discuss effects of COVID-19 on higher education. We move on, and now I'd love to invite Dr. Pauline Essa, who is the Director of Research and Insights at ESSA, to set the scene for this webinar. Over to you, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Isel. Yes, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to be invited to set the scene for this fantastic webinar series that PASGR is organizing in collaboration with ESSA. Just before we go into the main presentations, really my mission here is to make you aware of the series that we're organizing, focusing on COVID, sort of as the first partnership that we're engaging in. So as you've been told, and since you are here, you are aware that the first webinar will focus on the impact of COVID-19 on our universities in Sub-Saharan Africa and what the impact has been and how we can actually learn from that to improve the quality of tertiary education in our institutions. So I won't give any further information. All will be revealed when Samuel and Trin give their presentations, and of course, the panel discussion and your own involvement as the audience will be really appreciated. But just to give you a flavor of what will be coming next, we'll be organizing some more of these webinars, and one of the topics we'll be looking at will be how to ensure inclusion and inclusivity in higher education in Sub-Saharan Africa. So some of these issues we've picked on were prevalent before COVID, but in some cases, COVID has exacerbated the challenges that we already face. So really it's about us highlighting work that PASGR and ESSA have done in collaboration with our own other partners, just to bring that to the fore and to showcase what we're finding and to engage your own thoughts on how we can address some of these issues, existing solutions that may be available that we can all discuss. And so, yeah, we hope you will join us for that webinar when information is circulated by our very brilliant communication teams. The other topic we've picked on to share with you all is one that focuses on institutional support and capacity strengthening in higher education institutions in Sub-Saharan Africa. What was the impact of the pandemic on this very important aspect of development in our institutions and strengthening institutional capacity, the capacity of lecturers? What was the impact of COVID, and how did institutions mitigate these challenges and what more can be done to make sure that we're learning from the lessons of COVID and the opportunities that COVID provided to ensure that we don't go back to how things were being done, but rather we move forward to strengthen the quality of tertiary education in our institutions. A third topic that will come in the future is about how can we create opportunities for higher education institutions in Sub-Saharan Africa to collaborate more at the national and at the regional and at international levels. So we know some of this is already happening, but obviously COVID brought in new dimensions, new ways of partnering that maybe didn't exist beforehand. Obviously there's been hybrid partnerships and online virtual partnerships. What are the pros and cons of those, and how did we navigate those spaces in our various institutions, and how can we move forward in terms of co-creating ways of engaging to further strengthen these partnerships and the research and outputs that come out of those. So these are, we think, are really interesting topics coming out of our research that we want to engage with a range of stakeholders to address and to come up with some useful recommendations that will move from to enable us to move from research to policy and to practical action. So in terms of who we're expecting to join these webinars, in fact, we welcome everyone and anyone who is interested in seeing higher education in Sub-Saharan Africa moved to even greater heights. And so we're expecting and hoping that even for today and in the future, that there are people from ministries and policymakers and actors from all over Africa and beyond Africa. So intergovernmental organizations, educators. So we're hoping councils of higher education, quality assurance agencies, rectors, vice chancellors will be here and to participate in these conversations. At the university level, the researchers, the teachers, the early career researchers, we wish that you would all come in and participate. This is for us, but it's also for you. NGOs, civil society groups, industry, corporate, you're the ones employing our graduates from universities. We want to hear your voice as well and to contribute to these discussions. International partners in and outside Africa. We're working in partnership here. All that ESSA and PASGR do is about partnerships, working in collaboration, mutually beneficial partnerships, though I should stress, not top-down partnerships, partnerships that really bring benefit to both sides and lead to future advancement of our institutions. So please, if you know people who need to hear these messages and are not here, please prompt them when you see future advertisements for our webinars and encourage them to join us and participate. In terms of what we'll be doing after these webinars, I mean, obviously for us, it's about getting the word out there, getting co-creation of solutions. And once we have those from these webinars, during the webinars and beyond, the plan is that we will share reports from these webinars with you all and ensure that we can prepare policy briefs out of these reports as well, because we know our stakeholders receive and absorb evidence in different ways. And so we'll be targeting policy briefs for our policy stakeholders, but also we hope that this will generate more increased awareness of cross-continental knowledge sharing and learning, that we can all learn from each other through these engagements to really tackle issues that we face in higher education institutions. And also the recommendations that are coming out of these conversations will be used to advance our own universities and ensure that we are producing quality graduates that will come in and work in the various workforces and really uplift our continent. So that's it. I hope that encourages you to join us in the future. And I'm really excited to see what we can do together today. Thank you very much. And back to you, Aizal.
Thank you so much, Pauline. And really grateful that you highlighted that we're not just sharing findings, but together we want to create solutions that we will work for young people. Thank you. We move on, and I would love to invite Samuel Akiapong, the manager at ESSA, and also Trin from International Association of Universities, who will take us through some research findings from COVID-19 studies. Over to you, Samuel and Trin.
Thank you very much, Aizo. for the opportunity. Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel Nyakwa, as was mentioned by Isel, and today I'm going to walk you through one of the studies that we conducted with IECA on the impact of COVID-19 on higher education institutions in East Africa. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has affected all aspects of modern life, and then higher education sector has not been left alone. The pandemic has created a lot of an unprecedented test to the rigidity and the quality of higher education systems in Sub-Saharan Africa. Today, I'm going to present or showcase the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the quality assurance systems in higher education in East Africa. And I'm going to draw from the evidence that was generated from a partner study that was conducted by the Inter-University Council for East Africa and then Education Sub Saharan Africa. The focus will be on teaching, learning, and also exams and assessment. The study was conducted in the East African community with focus on 6 countries: Burundi, Kenya, Rwanda, South Sudan, Tanzania, and also Uganda. We used an online survey tool to collect data from 1,658 participants, and this included students, faculty members, or lecturers, university officials, and then also regulators of higher education across the 6 countries. It will interest you to know, or it's important for me to mention, that the study was conducted within the period of April to June 2021. This is a breakdown of the responses that we got from the study. In general, in total, we got 1,658 responses from students, faculty members, principals and vice chancellors of universities, and also academic registrars. As you all know, the COVID-19 facilitated the swift transition from face-to-face learning to online learning. So in the study, we tried to understand the speed at which universities were able to migrate from face-to-face to online learning. And the results indicated that out of the universities that we engaged with, 39% of private universities and 18% of public universities were able to immediately transition into online learning. Other universities also were able to transition in various times, within 1 to 3 months, as well as long as 6 to 9 months for them to transition. We try to understand how they were able to migrate most of the academic programs as well as their students onto these platforms. And our evidence showed that 45% of private universities and also 20% of public universities were able to migrate 90% of their academic programs. In similar fashion, 36% of private universities were able to migrate 90% of their students. This is compared to 20% of public universities being able to migrate 90% of their students. This shows that most of the public universities were a bit ready most of the private universities were a bit ready compared to the public universities. We try to understand the factors that hindered the transition or the speed of the transition from face-to-face to online learning. And we realized that there are a lot of challenges that university faced, and picking data from university chancellors and then also registrars, we realized a general lack of digital skills and also the infrastructure for this transition. Also, there was the lack of policy in order to aid this transition. Data from the vice chancellors showed that generally there was sentiment around having clear guidance, and then also clear guidance on accreditation and also how to conduct online learning. And this was coming from not much clearer guidelines from regulators who were regulating higher education within the region. Digging deeper to understand the student experiences, we gathered information on how the challenges that students and faculty members faced during this period of the pandemic. The results indicated that both faculty members and students lacked the needed skills in order to transition. Also, there was general lack of, or what we call the digital divide that was created by the COVID-19 pandemic. And most students asserted this to creating inequality in learning. Also, faculty members indicated that they required more time to prepare and conduct online classes or lessons compared to in-person classes. On examination and assessment, our results indicated that also there was a general lack of skills and equipment to undertake online or remote examination. Also, on quality issue, we realized that both students and faculty members raised concern about the difficulty in upholding the integrity of online examination. And a general sentiment that also came out from the study was that there was lack of, let's say, digital divide, or there was the system failure when it comes to conducting and participating in online or remote examination. We try to understand how this pandemic or the COVID-19 pandemic affected the quality assurance or the quality delivery of education within the sub-region. And we ask questions around how institutions and regulators try to maintain the quality of teaching and learning. Our results indicated that, and we're picking from students and faculty members, most institutions within the region trained their students and faculty members on how to conduct and also participate in online learning and teaching and learning. Also, generally, most universities provided bundles or internet for their students and faculty members, as well as providing them with equipment in order to be able to undertake online learning. Sadly, close to 40% of faculty members indicated that their institution didn't support them in order to transition or provide the needed capacity in order for them to transition from face-to-face to online learning. Similar to that of students, 32% indicated that they received no support from their students. We try to dig deeper to understand the views of regulators in ensuring quality standards. And 66% of the regulators that we interacted with or responded to the survey indicated that they have developed guidelines in order to aid the smooth transition into online learning. However, the results in the asking questions around guidelines on examination, we realized that none of the regulators that we interacted with had developed guidelines for conducting examination via online platforms. Looking forward, we asked students and faculty members how they see the future of education to be. And generally, most students prefer the blended learning approach. This was also recommended by the faculty members who suggested blended learning approach for the future of education. In conclusion, the study revealed that there wasn't clear guidelines on conducting online teaching and learning assessment. Also, the region showed great resilience in transition from face-to-face to online learning. And as has been mentioned earlier on, there was a general lack of digital skills and infrastructure to deploy online teaching and learning. And there was a general concern regarding the integrity of conducting examination and assessment online. Blended learning, as was mentioned also, is the preferred approach for students in order to engage in future education. So thank you very much. I'll pause here and then also turn the mic over to my colleague Aizil for us to continue. Thank you. Aizil.
Thank you so much, Samuel. I'll allow Trin to also share with us research findings from IAU.
Thank you very much, Aizil. And first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here and share with you the work that we've been doing at IAU. And I also want to congratulate PASGR and ESSA on this new webinar series that I find extremely important and interesting, and I'm looking forward to the other chapters of the series as well. So let's dive into it. Just to explain very briefly, my name is Trine Jensen and I work for the International Association of Universities. It's an NGO that was created more than 70 years ago by UNESCO, and we are working out of the headquarters in Paris, but we work together with our members, which is around 600 institutions around the world in several countries. And really the backbone of our work is to generate international collaboration across regions. We work on different areas, among others, leadership, internationalization, sustainable development, and digital transformation. And digital transformation is the area that I am leading and that I'm going to talk a little bit about here in this session. So before we move into the research that we conducted in relation to the impact of COVID on higher education, I wanted to take you back in time, make you travel a little bit, because IAU actually conducted a global survey on the state of digital transformation. The data collection took place end of 2018 and then into the middle of 2019. And we published the result of that survey really in January 2020, just a few months prior to the beginning of the pandemic. And as you can imagine, that is a very difficult time to publish a report on the state of digital transformation, as the world just a few months later was about to completely change. But the reason why I bring it into here today is that I wanted to show you just a few figures about how the situation was at the global level before the pandemic hit us. And we had, that's the only slide that I bring in from this survey. If you're interested in learning more, it's freely available on our website. But we did have a question around the use of online learning and blended learning. And as you can see here on the slide, we had almost a third of the institution responding to our survey saying that they offered no online courses at that time. 43 offered up to 20%, but I mean, not necessarily, but up to 20% of their courses online. And only very few, up to 8%, said that they offered more than half of their courses online. And for this, it also includes those universities that are actually open universities and offering more or less all courses online. So you can see that at just a few months prior to the pandemic, online learning was not very common among the higher education community. When we look at the same data, but for blended and hybrid learning, it is very similar, although it was a little bit more used. So it is definitely certain that the pandemic has changed the way that we integrate remote teaching and learning in our teaching, in teaching and learning. So a bit like Samuel was explaining, IAU also conducted, we did 2 surveys on the impact of the pandemic on higher education. Our first one in 2020 was really at the outset of the pandemic, and then a more comprehensive survey that we did in 2021 and collected the data between February and June, so really 1 year into the pandemic. And there we have only, I mean, our surveys, in contrast to the one Samuel was explaining, we were reaching out to institutions asking for only 1 reply by institution, so an institutional reply. And we got almost 500 replies for some 112 countries that allowed us to kind of look at the data, of course, globally, but also by region. Here, I just brought in a few examples of the data that we saw in this survey, but we do see that 89% of the responding higher education institutions were now offering teaching and learning. Only 11% 1 year into the pandemic said that they did not offer remote teaching and learning. So there has been a huge increase, as you see, around the world to the extent to which that they make use of these alternative modes of teaching and learning delivery. We also looked at to what extent institutions were able to reach out to their student body. And in the table, you'll see at the same time the the global numbers, that institutions are saying that they reach out to 86% of their students. But when you look at the breakdown by region, you do see a difference here, for example, between Europe reporting 92%, and then in Africa, where institutions in average are reporting, reaching out to 74% of the students. However, when we break it down and look at how many of the institutions are actually reaching out to their full student body through online or remote learning, the numbers are much lower. But you will see that in Europe, we still have almost 40% of the institutions declaring that they reach out well to their students through these means of teaching and learning, whereas in Africa, the number is a bit lower with only 14%. However, then when we shift it around and say how many are reaching out to less than 50%, we see that it's only very few institutions in Europe, and it is still a quarter of the institutions in Africa. So this is telling us something about the access and I think Samuel was referring to the digital divides, and this is a reality in this new world where we are making more use of digital technologies, that it requires a certain infrastructure to be able to ensure that we reach out to the students and to ensure that the quality is there. We also had a more general questions around the use of digital tools, and here, because it's so similar across the regions, I only brought in the global numbers. As you see, no matter what criteria that we put in our question here, use of online learning, use of digital communication to communicate with students, virtual exchanges, collaborative learning, use of LMS, learning management systems, open educational resources, and learning analytics. Throughout the scale, most of the institutions were reporting an increase in the use of these digital tools. Now, of course, we have to keep in mind that this increase, of course, was forced by the pandemic and the restrictions that were in place. So I think that right now we are at a point in time where we hope that we're moving out of the pandemic and where we stand at a crossroad in terms of how do we want to shape the digital future from here? What can we learn from the experience during the pandemic in order to shape how we wish to make use, not by force, but by choice, digital tools moving forward? And here we are currently conducting a qualitative follow-up project to our quantitative analysis or a survey that we did, where we're asking a limited number of institutions to provide more information about how they now see the progress from here and forward, and how they want to shape the future of teaching and learning. And I just brought in 4 examples. The analysis is not yet over, it's in progress, but I thought it would be very interesting to share with you as well to what extent that the experience and the visions forward also differ from one institution to another, meaning that there are different options as we shape the future of teaching and learning. The first example here on the screen is from a university in Pakistan, who is also referring to a new integration of collaboration with online education platforms in order to open up the education offer, and the encouragement to teachers to get certification in online teaching and learning to better understand international trends and to be better equipped to teach online. So that's one example. From Canada, we also see very similar to what Samuel was presenting in his survey, that students after this experience, this has also generated expectations in terms of the future possibilities or flexibility in the learning path, so that students are asking for more are expecting a more flexible choice that could be, of course, face-to-face, but also hybrid or online learning classes. And the institution in Canada is more also explaining that this also impacts the way that they structure their programs, potentially offering more certificates and micro programs, experimental learning, and more focus on research or entrepreneurship. So we really do see that the impact of the pandemic will have a long-term effect on teaching and learning. Here we have another example from Lesotho, where there is focus on the digital infrastructure, reminding us that the ideals and the objectives in terms of making use of digital technologies were already part of the strategic plan of the university prior to the pandemic, but that the pandemic actually demonstrated that although that the ambitions and the will is there, it still requires a certain investment in infrastructure that allows it to make it a reality. So the context is also shaping the opportunities and the possibilities. We also have another example from Brazil that I found interesting to bring in here as well, because we're focusing, of course, on online and remote teaching and learning. But here in this university, they had the conversation. They also see demands from students, but they have decided to shift back to what they believe would be the best mode for them and return more or less 100% to face-to-face learning. So I thought that these 4 examples gives you a picture of the different ways forward and to what extent that this experience of the pandemic will lead to a multiple way of actually shaping the future of teaching and learning. So when we are here today for the question about quality, I think that it is important to establish that the pandemic has certainly impacted teaching and learning. And I think that we all agree that quality must be at the center. And I think that it is regardless of the mode of learning. It should be whether it's face-to-face, online, or blended, quality must be at the center. I think we also need to acknowledge that in the emergency remote teaching and learning that was set up immediately after the pandemic, universities did their best to ensure that the education was not disrupted, but it does not necessarily mean that that type of teaching and learning is the best way of offering online learning. So I think that right now we're in a time where it's important to draw on lessons learned during the pandemic in order to take informed decisions about the way forward. I think that we have established, and that's also what Samuel was saying in his presentation, that there is a continuous need for capacity building. One thing is around tools, infrastructure, how to use them, but also in terms of understanding the difference in terms of pedagogy when it comes to online or face-to-face learning. We cannot just move from one space to another and implement the same modes of learning. So in that context, I think that quality assurance frameworks and systems may need to be adapted, but I think it's important that they remain the same for the program overall and not specific to the mode of learning. So to sum up, I think that we need to strive to enhance the online and blended offer, informed by the lessons learned, as just explained. I think that it's important that universities continues to invest in the building of capacities, both for online and blended modes of learning. And it's certainly important for the quality to implement, review, and adapt quality assurance mechanisms. I also take the opportunity here to make a little publicity for a recent publication that we launched together with the Open University of Catalonia in Spain. It is a very practical handbook where the professors of the Open Universities explained in very simple manners through, I think, a series of 12 chapters, how online education is different from face-to-face education. So really an easy, accessible guide in order to understand the differences between face-to-face and online education. And I think that's another way of as well contributing to ensuring that the quality remains high beyond the pandemic. Finally, I want to invite you all to take part in these conversations about how higher education is transforming. And IAU is very pleased to again be able to convene an in-person event. We are meeting at the University College Dublin in Ireland this year in October. So I hope that some of you will have the opportunity to join and continue the conversation there. Thank you very much. Back to you, Isel.
Thank you so much, Samuel and Trin. Wonderful research presentations on impacts of COVID-19 on higher education. I'll hand over to Dr. Pauline Gimwa, who is the Professional Development and Training Manager at PASGR, to manage the panel discussion and the Q&A session. Thank you, and over to you, Pauline.
Thank you very much, Aiso, and thank you, everyone. So far, we've done very well. We've got to that stage where we invite our panelists, and with us, we have highly experienced experts in this area of quality assurance and higher education. So allow me to briefly introduce our two panelists, and I'll start with Dr. Violet Makuku, who is an African higher education quality assurance and workshops coordinator and project officer at the Association of African Universities. I believe that is very familiar to all of us who are in the higher education space. AAU is located in Accra, Ghana. Dr. Makuku holds a PhD in quality assurance in university education from the University of South Africa in UNISA. Among her many contributions, particularly in this area of quality assurance, is that she's been part of the working group of higher education quality assurance experts, personnel and administrators who kickstarted the harmonization of quality assurance and accreditation for tertiary universities, tertiary institutions in Africa in 2016. And during the COVID-19, she was very active in organizing numerous practical-oriented quality assurance in online teaching and learning. She held workshops and that kind of training. The next panelist, equally highly experienced expert in quality assurance, is Dr. Hudson Quadani, who is the Director of Academic and Institutional Audits at the Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education, a position he's held since October 2021. And before joining Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education, he was the Director of Quality Assurance at Lupane State University in Zimbabwe. His main responsibility at the council is to coordinate auditing of internal quality assurance systems of 20 universities in Zimbabwe. He holds a PhD in higher education administration major and geography minor from the University of Arizona. He has vast training expertise in areas such as quality assurance in education, public policy analysis, institutional marketing, strategic planning, and change and conflict management. Dear participants, we encourage you to put in your questions for both the panel and the presentations that have just been done in the Q&A. I'll go straight to our panelists. And the first question is that I would like you to make reflections on what has been presented. We had Trun come in with an international perspective of what was happening globally. And then Samuel has brought us closer home to present some of the work that they did with Inter-University Council of East Africa. So I'd like our two panelists to give a response to these findings in light of what was happening in your respective universities. And they say ladies first. So I want to give this opportunity to Violet to come in first, and then Dr. Quadani will follow. Over to you, Violet.
Thank you very much. Allow me to stand on the protocols already observed, and my name has been introduced already. So for me, what is very interesting, you know, we are at continental level, and like you said, the whole of 2020 I did a lot of workshops related to quality assurance of online teaching and learning, quality assurance of research under the lockdowns. And as I did those things, I realized that a lot was happening. And the good thing is that these research results really confirmed some of the things that I met there. Why did I get inspired to do the online teaching and learning as well as online research workshops? So when I started attending the workshops which were offered by other organizations, synchronous on asynchronous and synchronous teaching and learning support, there are two things which I noted, and I was very much concerned. During those online workshops and what have you, I normally deliberately asked, so what about quality assurance issues? Nobody responded to me. I asked also, how about the teaching and learning of practical-oriented disciplines? Nobody responded to me. And those two gaps, I knew that at continental level, as a quality assurance expert and workshops coordinator as well as facilitator, I needed to run with them in order to plug those two gaps. So I ran workshops on teaching of practical-oriented disciplines and quality assurance. And I realized one or two things. People knew about the applications or platforms that they could use, but maybe they were beyond their reach, you see. Also, some of the platforms and applications were peculiar in certain regions. For example, they were only developed for India. And when you are in Africa, you try to use them, you wouldn't be able to. There were also institutions which were ignorant about even the existence of things like simulations, micro labs, and so on. And those are the things which I concentrated on. Regarding quality assurance, I realized that in terms of research, for example, most institutions do not subscribe, for example, to the SurveyMonkey for their students and staff. And that really affected research in institutions, because now with lockdowns, you can't go about with physical questionnaires. In terms of teaching and learning, rightly said by the two presenters, people lacked the skill on how to go about it. And so as AAU, that's when we started coming in. There's something I want to tell you which is funny, very funny. For the national accreditation bodies throughout the continent, you know, there are institutions which offered, it was presented earlier by one of the two presenters, that they offered few programs online. Pick that up. There are some which offered it for a whole faculty or a part of a faculty in certain programs. That's number one. Number two, do you know that we have, please, I may miss its pronunciation. It's a real narration, but it's an association of distance education institutions like the Zimbabwe Open University, the Open University of Nigeria, the Tanzania Open University, Tunisia Open University. So where am I leading you to? When the national accreditation bodies responded that they did not have the standards and the way to do the assessments, for me, it's only that they didn't know where to start from because of the confusion of COVID-19. So as the Association of African Universities, I now did a webinar on 6th July to tell them of the existing tools, the existing standards, which they could take on board. So this included the toolkits for this open and distance learning. I now advise them also to look into the programs which they had already accredited, which were online, because nothing would be peculiar to moving and using online standards which have been generated to manage those courses which were now coming on board to just join what has been going on. So the physical presence, and what is worrying me now is that some institutions want to go back to face-to-face. Why do they want to go back to face-to-face with the fourth industrial revolution? It's also affecting Africa. I'm just winding off to stop so that maybe I can come in later on. So you find with the fourth industrial revolution, it's affecting everyone. The banks are automating, industry is automating, agriculture is automating, engineering is automating. So when they go back to face-to-face, can't you see the disservice that is going to happen? And what will happen to the investment?
Dr. Makubu, I would like you to put that on hold, because it's an important point that you're bringing about.
Okay.
And we'll come back to it. And allow Dr. Quadani to come in and give us what was happening in Zimbabwe in relation to the findings that have just been presented.
Thank you very much, Doc. I'm going to put off my camera so that probably I'll be more audible. Thank you very much for the presentation, which are very clear, or which were very clear. I'll start directly with Jensen's presentation. Good strategy of comparing pre-COVID and COVID period. I think this is very clear that COVID had an impact in terms of our ecosystem of teaching. Apparently, Zimbabwe universities, some of them did also learn from others, like the use of Coursera courses, which Coursera gave free of charge. I know Lupani State University did quite a lot. In terms of what Lesotho did, the challenges of infrastructure, is very clear that we had the same ambitions in our universities, but of course, the expenses related to infrastructure are noted and applicable in our situation. Let me focus on the issues which Jensen raised, that quality should be at the center. Very, very important, because if we are not careful in our higher education, we might simply have what Jensen calls emergency remote teaching and learning is not the same as online teaching. I think in her slides, that was very clear, that if we are not careful, just having a computer and internet and think that we are giving online, that might be misleading. Because when we come to examinations, we had a few challenges where universities might have said, we are now giving online examination. On closer examination, you find that it was just a take home. So those were some of the challenges. And most importantly, one thing I want to emphasize from Jensen's presentation is the idea that we need to adapt quality assurance practices of the traditional teaching and online so that they are integrated. And a number of quality assurance agencies have already alluded to that. If you look at Ireland, the quality and the qualification Ireland, they say the two have to be integrated so that the quality assurance of the two systems are not different. And finally, what the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation countries are doing, that this should be integrated. And as Zim Chair in our country, we are also trying to integrate the quality assurance systems of online as well as the traditional, and that have been very helpful. And in terms of the results appear very similar. Zim Chair, Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education did carry out research to find out what was happening. And we found that the challenges are more or less the same. And we did a lot of training with a lot of webinars to try to capacitate our staff and our students, and also to encourage universities to provide assistance with data bundles to our students. Otherwise, in the interest of time, I'll wait here, probably come later. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Dr. Quadani. These are very interesting insights that are coming in. What I like about both of you is that you're combining what the findings of the two studies show with what was happening in your own respective institutions. Now, both your organizations are charged with issues to do with policy. I know Africa AAU, you sit at the continental level where you oversee what is happening and make and facilitate policy dialogues and debates. And in Zimbabwe, as the regulatory body, you also expected to make policy recommendations. So to both of you, and starting with Dr. Quadani, I would like you to give us an indication of some of the lessons that were emerging and what policy recommendations that you think are emerging that can be presented to ensure quality in e-learning practices.
Thank you very much, Doc. Probably let me briefly go through what ZimChair did just to try to bring in the way forward. That training of students and staff was done, provision of data bundle in terms of encouragement. ZimChair also promoted the evaluation of online teaching as a policy, that we need to develop instruments. And those instruments, while we are trying to evaluate, they are also teaching tools. So the instruments are already in place at university level and also at ZimChair level, where we can look at globally our university. So the evaluation system of online learning and teaching is already in place. What we have also done is that we now have regular webinars so that our instructors do not grope in the dark. They are well informed at discipline level. So these are not generic, these are specific. As I present, we are now finalizing our quality assurance systems for online as well as traditional combined operation. If we look at what other continents are doing, for example, let's look at Southeast Asia, where Australia is also included. They do have best practices. And as ZimChair, as Zimbabwe, we are now trying to benchmark, adapt, and adopt the good practices, not just from those. If we look at the African standards, they do have a section where they talk about how can we improve quality for online distance teaching. And lastly, we need to remember that online teaching is distance teaching. Therefore, the pedagogics of teaching has to be understood. Our lecturers should understand what does it mean to teach at a distance, and therefore our designs should take note of that. Thank you.
Very useful policy recommendations there, and I'm happy that you've already instituted some of them in Zimbabwe. Dr. Makuku, at AAU, you are the regional facilitators of policy dialogues, and as a quality assurance expert, what policy dialogues have been taking place, and what are you recommending so that you can improve quality assurance? And I'm particularly interested in picking from where Dr. Quadani has left concerning support for the educators, the lecturers, in terms of skills acquisition. So if you could take just 3 minutes to tell us what is happening at that space and zeroing into what is happening in supporting the faculty.
Thank you so much. Actually, allow me to start from what we are doing to support the faculty, but we are not supporting the faculty alone. We are also supporting the quality assurance agencies at national level Mind you, we are also a continental body, the implementing arm of higher education in Africa for the African Union. So capacity building through online teaching and learning workshops is one thing that we have really embarked on. And I see it, we do it at international level, and we also do it at institutional level, because what happens is when you have an international workshop, those people will go back to their institutions and report on what we will have done with them. So we go now to do the institutional. Before Dr. Quadani left, AAU took them through the Big Blue Button and some other online teaching and learning tools. I want to say that also we continue to have webinars which help, but the key issue which has been highlighted by everybody so far is the need for the skill. So the AAU has made a deliberate move to do workshops of hand holding. Do you know, most people just have the skill to join the Zoom platform, but to create their personal Zoom platform, they can't do that. In the interest of time, allow me to move to what the AAU has done along the line of policy dialogues and so on. So we are looking at not only the digitalization of institutions, but also the quality assurance agencies like ZIMCHE. They also need to digitalize, because everybody needs to walk the talk, and then they can go the blended mode, so that even if they are doing institutional assessments or evaluations for accreditation, part of it, they ask institutions to upload documents and so on. We had dialogue with vice chancellors. We asked them of their challenges. We asked them also of their suggestions. And we did write policy briefs. But everybody pointed to the issue of infrastructure. Ladies and gentlemen, we can talk about quality assurance, but what is at the core of everything is the quality of infrastructure. Some had infrastructure well and running, others needed to do some renovations. Even with internet services, it's the same, but at a national level and at continental level, we had dialogue with the ministries responsible for ICT and communications, as well as finance, so that they can expand into the rural areas, the internet infrastructure and ICT services. So that's what we have done. And can I do a bit of recommendations before? With your
You have
permission?
1 minute to do that.
1 minute, yes. So institutions should be involved in the national research and education networks. I can give more information later. In the interest of time, there's very little I can say about those ones. But for regional networks also, we have UbuntuNet for Southern and Eastern Africa. When you use one account for many countries from where they can draw internet services, it becomes between 70 to 90% cheaper. The last one, the blended approach, is here to stay. I talked about industry automating. So if we drop the online, which enables us to transfer those skills as we use it for teaching, where will our graduates go and work without ICT skills and internet services, knowledge and skills? I thank you.
Very important points that you have made there, and I like your recommendations. And NRENs were very instrumental in the sudden shift. And here in Kenya, where we sit, we saw Kenneth really working in partnership with universities. So I agree with you. Universities need to be very active in the NRENs, the various NRENs in their respective university countries. Thank you very much, participants. I'm looking at the Q&A, and you have lots and lots of questions that are coming in. We will try our very best, but time is not on our side. So I request our panelists and presenters to be very brief in responding to the questions to see how much you can cover. So I will start with a question that has come in to Samuel. How do you see the role of blended learning in widening access to higher education? That's a question from Samuel Asare to Samuel Ajimpo. Over to you, Samuel.
Thank you very much, Pauline. I think blended learning is the next or the future of tertiary education as it stands now. And it provides students the opportunity for in-person classes as well as engaging online classes. And what it does is that, the future of the labor market is also moving to a space where, we use digital system. So students, the role that the blended learning will play in the future of students is that it provides students with the needed skills in order to be relevant in the labor market, as well as have the full benefits of education. I hope I'm able to answer your questions some more. Thank you.
Thanks, Samuel. There's an interesting question that ties up with what Violet was talking about, the quality of infrastructure and quality assurance issues. And this is a question that is to Trin by Elias. How do you ensure quality if infrastructure and appropriate resources are not provided? Over to you, Trin.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. I think that is an interesting one, because I think that I fully agree with Samuel saying that blended learning, I believe that it's the future. I also believe that when we decide how we are going to provide teaching and learning in the future, I don't think that by default it has to be online. I think that we have to see what we can do, taking into consideration the constraints of the infrastructure available. So for example, we had panelists in some of our webinars from South Africa saying that for students, it is also very important to be on campus, that it is an equalizer in terms of being together on campus and exchanging with students. So I don't necessarily believe that everything needs to be online. However, some things could potentially be online. We could imagine that instead of having huge rooms with lectures, that the lectures could be recorded and disseminated with students and viewed from different spaces. It could even be from computers on the campus for students that are in need of access to data on campus, but could also be viewed at other times. Here, there is an opportunity to actually allow students to review the lecture several times, to listen. So I think it's about seeing where can we actually do things differently in a way that can contribute to enhancing education, the teaching and learning experience. And I think that it's absolutely okay that it's not the same in one university from another, because I think it's extremely important to take into consideration the possibilities and the means available. So if we know that they do not have the devices or data needed for online education, in that case, I think that the quality would be higher by bringing them to campus. If we know that students do have this possibility, then let's see what can be done remotely. Everything does not need to be in an online space either. It could be group work outside of campus, on assignments, etc. So there are different possibilities. I think it's a matter of taking into consideration the context, the infrastructures, and then take informed decisions about what is the best solutions for my institutions, considering our constituencies, the possibilities of our students. But yes, of course, I hope and I work for that we will all have the means in the future to explore the potential of digital technologies.
Thank you, Trin. I want to direct the next question to Dr. Quadani. This is a question from Ruby Kodom, who is asking what factors are considered when certifying online programs. Over to you, Dr.
Thank you very much for the question. Probably, let me start by acknowledging that my previous university, we got a lot of assistance to train during COVID from the Association of African Universities, as Dr. Makudu alluded to. And then the university in Lupane ended up also helping other universities, which was very useful. And also, of course, ZimChair has also started accrediting programs using online facilities, which is in line with digital use of information and technology. What factors to be considered? Let me say, first of all, content quality. We have to look at content quality. We have to look at the learning objectives, alignment to content. The nature of feedback, which is being provided, which should be online. The motivation being provided to students. The design and the usability of the online systems in place. Is the design compatible with what is expected in online teaching? Accessibility is very, very important. And of course, we also have to look at the issues of instructional design. We need specialists to look at how do we design our instruction. It's very, very important. That's why earlier on I talked about, first and foremost, we should know that this is distance teaching. And in terms of design, do we design for a student who is alone? In terms of how do we structure the content? Is it simplified to the extent that the student could understand? And of course, technology. What type of technology do we use? So if this could be designed, and we can even design the questionnaire to find out whether these attributes I've talked about are being met. And of course, we also have to look at best practices of how these are to be looked at. I'm sure we should be able to meet the satisfaction levels for students. Thank you.
Thanks for that response. There are questions around examinations, and allow me to combine them in the interest of saving time. So I would like any one of you to respond to the question of examinations, online examinations, and ensuring quality, in offering examination online. Anyone who can respond to that?
Yes.
Probably.
Oh, go ahead, Dr.
Go ahead,
Quadani.
Okay, thank you. The issue of examinations in terms of academic integrity of exams is a contentious issue. However, a number of technologies have been put in place in terms of monitoring the student who is writing, so that the systems are in place to see who is actually writing. However, with all that technology, other experts are saying it is also advisable to have students come and write on Canvas so that we know exactly who is writing for who. Even in developed countries with all the technology, they found that cheating in exams may not be eliminated. Therefore, having face-to-face exams with students is also recommended. Thank you.
Violet, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to add that there's a big difference between assessment and its credibility in Africa as opposed to the developed world. Here in Africa, you know, for many years, we have been rejecting this mode of teaching and learning simply because we were aware of our incapacity in terms of maintaining the credibility of the examination system. But what do I want to say right now? Whatever we have cannot be foolproof. We have proctoring, you are checking eye movement, you are checking the whatever, but I've realized that the many examples of academic dishonesty I have seen would require, for example, somebody writing an exam overseas, the developed countries, they've had a face recognition, and that has helped, which we may not have here because we can't afford as institutions. The other one is problematic. You can be doing the proctoring, but somebody surrounding themselves here on the table, you can see me writing and typing, but My eyes can quickly go up to the left and down, even if you say you monitor. It's not foolproof. What I'm also saying is we may have some free, we should talk about open online resources before we conclude the whole thing, because most of the people are just thinking that everything that is valuable, you need to pay for it. We have open access resources. And this is one thing which can highly and make a difference in terms of the quality of education we can have. All that Dr. Quadani has raised in terms of quality materials and what have you, we already have examples of good open access. Please, just before, I want to say that there are grants. There are grants since COVID-19. You know, the Bible says, my people perish because of lack of knowledge. Grants on ICT infrastructure, grants on improving internet services. But the issue is, do you even know the grants exist? Do you even know who is offering those grants? Because the major excuse in Africa is finances. Why don't you think of third stream income rather than waiting for government? How do most prominent good private universities exist? So we need to look for those grants, apply for them. Once you get it, you do a lot of difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Violet. And on that note, I would hope that AAU has consolidated those grants that people can go and access. There's an interesting question about the gender aspects on the studies that have come out. So to you, Samuel and Trin, briefly, were there any gender issues that came out of your studies?
I can be very brief here, Pauline, because we collected data from the institutional perspective, and we were not able to collect data divided by gender. So we don't have any information, unfortunately, to share here.
Mm-hmm. Samuel, anything that came out?
Yes, it's kind of similar because we collected at this level, but on research, because I didn't really present on research, but then we had gender disparity when it comes to research, where more women were not able to, publish their work due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then you could see there were a lot of issues, taking care of the home as well, and also taking care of the children and all that, which affected their participation in research. So most of the faculty members that we engaged with had that issue. Yeah, thank you.
Quite interesting observation there. And I think the person who asked that question would want to pursue that. It's an interesting area to pursue. There's a question that is directed to Dr. Makuku, and Dr. Makuku, you only have a minute to respond to it. It's about the context. And I think you're the one who talked about context in your presentation. Most of the technologies that we see are coming from outside. Some Asian countries such as India have gone a step further and modified such technologies to suit their context, and sometimes the African context. For example, the model for online assessment. How can Africa higher education leverage in some of these technologies to adopt them and modify them for their local context? You have
thank you very much. Yes, just in the half a minute, please allow me to say, despite the gender component, I thought we were also going to consider students and faculty. The training for students is worrisome. It's something I need to register here. In terms of what I've been asked, I can say that it's not true that in Africa nothing is happening. And it worries me to know that the valuable distinctions and merit dissertations and thesis done throughout the universities, and also in those specialist areas like the ICT, where are they? They are lying in shelves, and there are people who are even employed from other continents to come and check the researches which are being done by our own people here, go there, develop them and sell them back to us. And we say they are all developed in the developed countries. It's not true. We need to look for them. I can give you one good example of Valley View University here in Ghana. They have a rapid response team made of their students and staff and the ICT department together. That's why they didn't take 2 weeks to come on board, because they valued what their students did. And the researchers, the students developed the softwares, platforms, and applications. So if you have that faculty, make use of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that response. I still want to come back to you on the fourth industrial revolution. And you started talking on it. What quality assurance issues that you'd want to allude to when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution? You have the final minute, Dr. Akuku, because I cut you short when you're talking about the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay, thank you so much. Our wash in the newspapers in Africa is always higher education, quality assurance agencies, and the industry blame game of half-baked graduates. And once we talk of half-baked graduates, it means there's some quality which is lacking. Today, we can't have a graduate who is incompetent in ICT skills, in ICT tools, which are digitalized. And so what I'm saying is, in terms of quality assurance, when we are doing accreditation of institutions, accreditation of programs, we should make sure that there are criteria to check on the preparedness of having every degree program, every course, having an ICT component attached to it, so that when we do that, we are sure, as they are being taught using technologies, the technology use is being transferred to them, but also there's a deliberate component that is attached to every course so that they can manage, be it music, architecture, agriculture, medicine. We need to do that deliberate move. And it's part of what we are calling quality these days, because the transformation of our curricula requires us to do that, for us not to have half-baked graduates. I thank you.
Thank you very much. That resonates very well with a comment that has been made by Bernard, that it is indeed high time learning institutions change to blended mode of teaching and learning. This is because majority of the learners are teenagers who love technology. I presume teenagers in their end towards the early adulthood at the university. And they want to start working even before clearing trainings. This means that they want to work and learn at the same time. We are coming to the end, and I want to give you, each of you, both you and Dr. Quadani, have a minute to give us a parting shot. We start with Hudson.
Thank you very much. I think in Zimbabwe, we are on the right track with respect to what needs to be done. Our education now is based on 5 pillars: research, community service, teaching, but innovation, industrialization. All what we teach must bring about innovation to bring about modernization and industrialization of our country. And to do that, we need quality assurance for both online and also, of course, for face-to-face blended learning. If we integrate this so that all what we do is quality assured, and our goals for development are innovation, industrialization based for modernization, I think will be on the right track. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Makuku.
For me, I encourage all institutions to adopt the blended approach. I also want to talk about current definition of quality assurance is constant transformation, which requires agility as one of the institutional and personal cultures, because it's the personal culture which makes the institutional culture. I want to say, if you are not agile, you remain irrelevant. When you are irrelevant, you become obsolete. Let's also look for those grants. let's also embrace the digital technologies. Let's also make use of our youths who are very good, who are techno-savvy, and not even look at the age gap, which is a problem right now, because the young ones can teach the older ones. The older ones can teach the younger ones about professionalism and others, but let's befriend the young ones so that they remove the phobia as they teach us how to navigate through. Thank you. Constant training of everyone, students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our dear panelists and our presenters. Thank you very much, participants. I have to apologize that I've not been able to cover all the comments and questions. I tried my best to combine where I could. Very useful comments, very relevant questions that have come in. We want to encourage you to continue participating in our forthcoming webinars and carry on this conversation so that we can try as much as possible to exhaust the concerns that are coming up out of the COVID-19 pandemic impact. So allow me to bring this session to an end. Obviously, if we had more time, we would have continued with a lot that is coming out from our panelists and from our presenters. So I would now want to hand the mic to my dear colleague, Dr. Martin Atela, the Manager for Research and Policy here at PASGR, to give us a vote of thanks. Over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Pauline. Please confirm and you can hear me.
We can hear you loud and clear.
Great, thank you very much. Colleagues and participants from across the globe, from wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening if you are in East Africa. Pauline has asked me to say a vote of thanks to our wonderful team of panelists and contribution made this webinar possible. Before I do that, please allow me to take a minute or so just to say a little bit about PASGR. We had quite a bit about ESSA, but we were not able to tell you about PASGR. And in all fairness, because the webinar is hosted by the two organizations, let me take a minute to tell you a bit about this institution that we work for. PASGR is a Partnership for African Social and Governance Research, an independent Pan-African organization headquartered here in Nairobi, whose main vision and objective is to work with a variety of partners across the continent and internationally to create a vibrant African social science community that is addressing the continent's public policy challenges. Currently, PASGR is working with partners and is actively engaged in over 15 African countries through enhancing research, excellence in governance and public policy, and through engaging with specific organizations to ensure that the research that we do in the continent actually is used for purposes of policy and programming in the continent. So as our name suggests, we are a partnership and we are proud of this approach that we have in terms of working with individuals as well as organizations, be they individual researchers, be they higher education institutions, be they think tanks, be they NGOs such as ESSA, civil society organizations, businesses and the private sector, and communities in the region and internationally. And we work very closely to support these organizations, not only to produce research that is relevant, that is demand-driven, that is responding to the needs of different stakeholders in the continent, but also to support them to ensure that they can access that research, which is partly informed by the seminar we've just had around PASGR Plus, that they can access that research, they can appraise that research, and those can also use that research for purposes of policy and programming. PASGR has three main programs contributing actively to developing an active African social science community. Research and policy, which I am privileged to lead. Higher education and professional development and training, which my colleague Pauline is leading. Through these 3 programs and through working with universities across the continent, we are able to actively do 4 main things. 1, establishing and sustaining partnerships nationally and regionally that advances research, that also advances higher education and also advances training. We are able to facilitate creation of what we call policy communities, research and policy communities that support uptake of evidence. We are also working very hard to institutionalize a research culture in the continent. And I think our panelists, including Violet, has talked about the issue of quality, which is really at the center of the research products that we produce in the continent. And finally, through several higher education programs, which I encourage you to check our website and look at, we are running a master's in research and policy with several African universities, and also a PhD in public policy. Very unique programs that I encourage participants to look through and see how they could benefit and and share with other people that might not be part of this conversation. Colleagues, allow me to express our sincere gratitude to a number of individuals and institutions that have made this conversation possible. Starting with our presenters, Samuel and Trine from ESSA and from the International Association of Universities, who shared with us very recent research they've done looking at the impact of COVID-19 on the quality of higher education and delivery and learning across the continent. From their conversation, which fed really well into the robust discussion from our panelists, both Violet and Hudson, a couple of things emerged, and I want to just emphasize 4 of them. One is the fact that whether it's blended learning, physical face-to-face, or just online learning in exclusivity, quality must remain at the center. Why is this important? And I think our panelists and presenters have really emphasized this. The industry is yearning for a different Africa. And it is saying the quality of graduates you're giving us are not meeting our expectation, which means we need as a continent to have a conversation around the quality of graduates that we're producing. And that doesn't matter whether we're doing blended learning, whether we're doing physical learning, or whether we're doing exclusive of the 2 options. The second thing, and I think it's our panelist Violet to mention this, is the challenge for our higher education to be agile. That if you're not agile, the world and changes around the world will bypass you, right? And agility means that you're then able to reform and change and make things adapt, as changes occur. So COVID-19 is not sort of the framework that decides whether you're surviving or not. But when pandemics such as COVID-19 occur, you are able to then learn quickly and adapt and do things differently. I think relevant related to quality is the point about relevance, that whatever training we are doing in the continent really needs to be relevant to the times, but it also needs to be relevant to the context where it is delivered. And I think this is why organizations like ESSA and PASGR become really important in partnering with our higher education to make sure that this is not just about adopting global standards without contextualizing them to what is practical in here. And the last point, which I thought they really emphasize and which I think is really important, is the issue around continuous learning. And for me, the important point about it was that this continuous learning is not just about our students. It is also about our teachers. It's about our lecturers. It's about our university administrators. And I say this because PASGR just finished implementing a very unique program, PEDO, an innovative pedagogical training that has really been centered around supporting delivery of learning using very different, unique approaches. So using that and the experience that PASGR has had, we've been able to develop unique approaches to learning that I think would be useful to share across the continent with other people who might be interested in ensuring that there's continuous learning, targeting both the lecturers and the learners as well. So allow me to really say thank you to Violet and Hudson for sharing your experiences, to Samuel and Trine for really sharing with us the important research that addresses this important issue about currency of learning during the pandemic. Moving on, please allow me to thank our moderators. I think I got the name right, Aizal and Pauline, who have done a wonderful job keeping us on toes and in time to make sure that both participants and our panelists had the time to deliver. I know that we didn't have all the time to get this done, but you will agree with me that they steered us very well up to this point that we're able to learn a lot of important things around higher education and COVID-19. Colleagues, let me pass a special thanks to the organizers of this meeting, the organizations, ESSA and PASGR, represented here very ably by our executive directors, Lucy and Anthony, who gave opening remarks and challenged us to really rethink our place in higher education and our relevance in supporting higher education in the continent. I'm very proud of the emerging and the budding relationship that ESSA and PASGR is building going into the future. And this being our first webinar together in a series of other webinars that are coming, I'm excited about the possibilities that the two organizations are able to deliver through the very able the very able leadership of Anthony and Lucy. So thank you, Anthony, thank you, Lucy, for making time for this, but also for the immense support and guidance that you've given us to be able to deliver this webinar. There is a whole lot of participants who joined this meeting. We are 91 still, almost heading to the second hour of this meeting. Thank you for making time. It's never easy to, juggle between our everyday work as well as joining Zoom, which has already become like a norm. Thank you for making time. We hope that you found this conversation relevant. We hope that you will join the subsequent conversations, and we hope that you will share what you've learned here today with your networks and organizations. Finally, Pauline, let me thank the background team that is not visible here. The team of communication specialists, I think from our end, Rachel, Elijah, Joy, all who've really worked hard to make this possible. One of our panelists talked about the fact that digital learning at some point is almost equated to providing access to Zoom and to a laptop, and whether that really facilitates learning. It is very difficult in the background to make sure that this number of participants can join, and the challenge is up there. So I really want to say thank you to the team of very dedicated staff who have worked with you, Pauline, and the ESSA team to make sure that this webinar has gone well. Thank you wherever you are. Have a wonderful evening. We look forward to having you and sharing with you and learning from you in the next series of seminars and conversations. Thank you.